On March 18, 1990, in the early hours of the morning, two men dressed as police officers walked into a Boston museum and walked out with over $500 million worth of art. It remains the largest unsolved art theft in world history. To this day, not a single piece has ever been recovered. This is the Gardner Museum heist. The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum housed over 15,000 pieces of art collected over a lifetime. Ironically, at the exact time of the robbery, the museum was in the process of upgrading its outdated security system. On the night of the heist, only 2 security guards were on duty. One of them, Richard Abath, was a music school dropout and part-time rock musician who openly admitted he sometimes showed up to work drunk or high after performing gigs. He insists, however, that he was completely sober that particular night. At around 12:54 a.m., a fire alarm went off on the 3rd floor. When investigated, there was no fire. Whether this was a deliberate distraction has never been confirmed. Half an hour later, at 1:24 a.m., 2 men dressed as police officers buzzed the security desk, claiming they were responding to a disturbance call. Given that it was St. Patrick's Day, loud parties in the area made this story completely believable. Abath let them in through the employee entrance, a direct violation of museum protocol. Once inside, one of the fake officers told Abath he looked familiar and that there might be a warrant out for his arrest. He asked Abath to step away from the security desk to show identification. This was no accident. The only emergency alert button in the entire museum was located at that exact desk. By getting Abath to walk away from it, the thieves eliminated any chance of triggering an alarm. Abath was then handcuffed, and he later admitted it struck him as odd that he was never searched, leading him to suspect something larger was happening. Shortly after, the second guard arrived and was also placed in handcuffs. When he asked why he was being arrested, the thieves corrected him. This wasn't an arrest. It was a robbery. The guard reportedly responded calmly, stating he wasn't paid enough to risk getting hurt protecting the artwork of wealthy collectors. Both guards were duct-taped at the hands, feet, and even their heads, then left in the basement. The thieves moved to the 2nd floor and split up. At one point, a motion sensor alarm was triggered, designed specifically to alert guards if someone got too close to the artwork. But because the only people who could respond to that alarm were the very guards already tied up in the basement, the alert meant absolutely nothing. For the next hour, the thieves moved freely through the museum, removing priceless pieces directly from their frames. At 2:28 a.m., they briefly returned to the security desk to check on the guards once more, then removed surveillance tapes from various points in the building. After roughly 81 minutes inside the museum, they loaded the stolen art into their vehicle across 2 separate trips. Witnesses later recalled seeing a red hatchback parked nearby. In total, 13 pieces of art were stolen, including 3 works by Rembrandt, and, strangely, a relatively obscure gilded eagle finial taken from the top of a Napoleonic flagpole. They even attempted to remove a 4th Rembrandt, but apparently found it too difficult to detach from the wall and gave up. The theft wasn't discovered until the next morning, when day shift guards arrived around 6:45 a.m. and found themselves unable to enter the building. Police were called and eventually found the 2 night guards, still handcuffed and duct-taped, in the basement. Despite wearing gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints, the thieves never covered their faces. And yet, when police asked Abath to describe the men for a sketch artist, he could barely remember any details. Years later, in 2005, the best description he could offer was that one of the men reminded him of a character from the television show Hogan's Heroes. In 1994, 4 years after the heist, the museum received an anonymous letter from someone claiming to know exactly where the stolen art was being kept. The writer demanded $2.6 million to help facilitate its return, warning that a buyer in another country was close to purchasing the pieces, unaware they were stolen. The museum agreed to negotiate. A second letter arrived, but the writer grew suspicious that law enforcement was attempting to track them down instead of negotiating in good faith. They were never heard from again. So, who actually pulled off the heist? There are three competing theories. The first centers on a career criminal named Brian McDevitt, who had previously attempted an almost identical robbery, disguising himself as a security guard to steal paintings from another museum. That earlier attempt failed, only because he got stuck in traffic and arrived after closing. McDevitt lived just a 10-minute drive from the Gardner Museum at the time of the heist, and was later questioned by the FBI and a grand jury. He has never been charged. The second, and most widely believed theory, is that this was an inside job, and that security guard Richard Abath was somehow involved. Beyond his inability to recall the robbers' faces, motion sensor data revealed something deeply suspicious. The sensors failed to detect any movement on the first floor during the actual robbery, yet they had recorded Abath wandering through that exact same room earlier that same night, before the thieves had even arrived. Adding to the suspicion, security footage later surfaced, showing Abath letting an unauthorized visitor into the museum the night before the heist, someone investigators believe may have been scouting the location in advance. Abath claims he has no memory of this visitor, despite being clearly visible on the recording. The third theory comes from Dutch investigator Arthur Brand, a renowned expert in recovering stolen art internationally. In 2010, Brand received credible information suggesting the stolen pieces had eventually made their way into the hands of Irish Republican Army associates. His theory suggests the artwork was initially stolen by small-time local criminals, sold to organized crime contacts in the United States, and ultimately smuggled overseas to Ireland sometime in the mid-1990s. The FBI has publicly stated they believe with high confidence that they know who was responsible for the original theft. They have never released those names. For years, the museum offered a $5 million reward for the artwork's safe return, no questions asked, at one point even temporarily doubling it to $10 million. That reward expired at the end of 2017. The statute of limitations for prosecuting the original theft expired decades ago, and federal prosecutors have publicly stated they will not pursue charges against anyone who comes forward with the missing pieces. And yet, despite every incentive imaginable, not a single painting has ever resurfaced. The frames that once held them still hang empty in the museum today, waiting for art that may never come home. What do you think happened? Drop your theory in the comments. And if you want more cases like this, subscribe to Mystery Minute. We'll be here every week, digging up the truth.